Welcome to another episode of Home Sweet Home with Russ McClellan and Friends. Here's your host, Russ McClellan.
Hey, this is Russ McClellan with Home Sweet Home Radio. We're doing our 80th show, and today I have an old friend and an expert in real estate. So welcome, Jeff. Thanks for calling in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Russ. Glad to be on today.
Yeah, we worked together. Gosh, how many years ago did we meet? I don't even know now. I think I had the same haircut, but it's been a while.
Yeah, before the financial crisis, I remember that. It was when we were optimistic things were just going to keep going and going.
Yeah, I remember at one point, because you were working with your dad in the real estate development game, and I said, I think it was in the maybe spring of 2008, I said, hey, I don't think I'd do anything on that land right now and just kind of see what happens. Your dad has always told me he appreciated that straight up advice, because the year before we worked together and we were all optimistic. And boy, did we learn some things in hindsight.
Absolutely, and you're right. We still got that ground we're holding on to. We bought it and we can hold it, but if we had broke ground and started putting in roads and utilities, it would have been a whole different ball game. And so, it's still there, and it'll be, the time will come for it at its right time, but that wasn't the time then, and it still hasn't recovered there. So it still sits. Yeah,
and we're getting closer, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well, because things have really accelerated. One of the things that we talk about often in my real estate brokerage, which we're now at about 70 plus agents, we're going into our third full calendar year as a Keller Williams. So I expanded from just in the Chelan market to now all over North Central Washington, and we're the number one office in agent count by far. And we're also moving up in the ranks. I think we're number 2 or 3 in volume. And part of that is in the last year just recognizing how many people are moving over the hill at a level that, even though I've been working the Chelan market for 30 years, that's kind of always been our MO, second homes, retirement. Now in this more what I called the forced adoption of technology and the embracing of this new concept by employers, where you can now, they're telling their employees they can live anywhere they want, by and large, and make the money they used to have to live in Puget Sound to make. So we're seeing a pure invasion in the nicest sense of the word, which is not always a good thing. We're down about 75% in inventory from a year ago across the board. And that obviously is challenging for locals from an economic perspective. It's challenging for brokers. We're seeing multiple offers on most every piece of property, and they're getting kind of silly, which I know Seattle, went through that as well. But now I really appreciate you calling in, because you're now a professional instructor at the University of Washington. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And you teach, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we talked about it, and you teach a class on private-public relationships as it relates to real estate, and then also a class on real estate development. And then you're working on another class that kind of helps graduate students blend all of their knowledge together. And maybe you could just kind of, take the reins for a minute and tell me, what your thoughts are and what you see in the real estate business.
Sure. So, as you said, with those classes, I will begin teaching. I was just asked to come on, so I haven't taught those classes yet. Those are existing classes within the University of Washington's Masters in Real Estate, and that's quite a program that I know with you, Russ, you're a lifelong learner. You're always out there trying things, and we've been in the real estate business for a long time, but there's, I feel, always so much more to learn. So, I had thought about going back to get my master's in real estate, and wasn't quite sure was it worth the energy and effort, but I looked at the program at the UW and I actually went back as a student. And one of the first things, meeting with the dean at the time, he said, well, he introduced the idea of teaching rather than being a student. And I said, I want to do the program because while I may do development, I don't know asset management, or I don't know retail, or the different silos of real estate. Well, enough to be dangerous, but I wanted to learn more. So went through and did the program, just finishing up, and I was blessed or lucky that they asked me to come back to help teach a couple classes, and those are the 3 that I'll start in the fall. And anyone interested in the program, I would encourage them to check it out. There's kind of 2 levels. at the University of Washington. They have for the and they introduced a undergraduate program as well. But the master's has one level for people that are experienced in real estate, and they do it in 3 quarters, and then people that may be transitioning from another career or profession, they can do it in 6 quarters. So I encourage people to check that out. And as you mentioned with the class, the public-private partnership and finance is one that we'll be doing in the fall. And a lot of these are just taking, ideas of, historic preservation tax credits, affordable housing, tax increment financing, and opportunity zones, and just trying to explore ways that in that class that the public sector and the private sector can try and work together and, use public financing as well, and see if there's different regulatory incentives out there that can make a project work that otherwise might not have worked on its own. So I'm excited about that one. And as well in the Nehemiah initiative that we did in the studio last year was really interesting as we talk about Seattle real estate changing. And that particular one looked at churches within the Central District, and it focused a lot on historically Black churches in the Central District and recognizing that they had the collective power as landowners and what they could do in an area that was facing rising costs and gentrification, and they were at risk of losing their residents and cultural capital. So that took kind of some brain power from students at the UW in graduate level, combining them with the bishops and the churches and the church community, and we just provided information with which they might be able to take back to their congregation, and in a changing environment in Seattle, what they might do with it. And some chose to do something, and some it wasn't right for, and some may be tabled for some time in the future. So that's just some of the things we were doing within the program this last year.
Well, it sounds very exciting. And are you able to teach your classes all on Zoom as well as in the classroom, or what do you foresee this coming up with COVID? How's that working?
My understanding is the goal is to be back in the fall. Here a year ago, I was in the classroom, or just 13 months ago, doing classes, and then it was right up at the end of winter quarter and springtime when we went to Zoom. So we've been virtual this whole year. All my classes have been over Zoom, and they'll continue this spring and summer quarter at the UW. But the goal is to be back in class in the fall.
Yeah, you said something also that's very apparent to me after 30 plus years, and that is, I don't know whether you call it the 10,000 hour rule or when you think you've mastered a subject. All that really means to me is that I know I don't know very much, really. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? When we're young and we enter the game, our world is pretty small, so we're pretty confident because we know everything inside our world. The relative challenge is the real world is a lot bigger than that. And as we get more knowledge and become more confident and experienced, which should lend us to being able to take more risks, we often find ourselves guarded because now we know what the word risk means. And understand that there's an infinite amount of knowledge to be learned. So that's exciting. I mean, you've had a consulting, real estate consulting company for a long time, and you're still doing that work. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So if you're interested in learning about Jeff, you can go to his website while we're talking about it, Jeff McCann, which is MCCANN.net. So jeffmccann.net, or you can email Jeff at jeff@jeffmccann.net. And, I think right now more than ever, consulting is an interesting game. I know I get a lot of questions about real estate development, and we're doing some real estate development work. In fact, I'm very intrigued by your public-private course because I'm involved in a pretty large project in a city that may end up needing some of that service and education. So I might just lean into you if you don't mind here in time. But wow, right now when you ask 100 economists what's going to happen, I think you'll get 100 answers.
Yes, and that was interesting in talking with a couple of the professors at the University of Washington who specialize in housing and the office market, and they can have two very compelling different answers and tell you why people are going to stay at home. It's going to be Zoom, and the other we'll know we have this need of humans to have human contact, and the best collaboration comes when you're all sitting around the table with a set of plans. So, I mean, crystal ball, and I don't have the answer. I have, thoughts sometimes one way and then it goes the other. But, wow, I mean, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we got about a minute left in this segment, and we'll come back to the second segment. And I'd like to hear in the second segment kind of your own 2 cents, and I'll give you my 2 cents, and we'll see how close we are related to this topic, because I'm like you. I think depending on the day that ends in Y, I might have a different opinion. So when we come back with Jeff McCann, he's calling in. He's a professional instructor for the University of Washington, a good friend, a highly skilled real estate development consultant. And if you want to get a hold of Jeff on his cell phone, you give him a call at 206-499-3443. All right, Jeff, and the rest of you listening out there, I'll tell you what, we'll be back in a few minutes and keep this intriguing conversation about real estate in just a few minutes.
Keller Williams.